How's it going, Bad Things family? You know, sometimes on Bad Things in History we cover special topics, sometimes it's more event related, and sometimes we just kind of profile really interesting dicks throughout history. This is one of those weeks. Now, let's learn about this dick. Some people, when they're young, seem to have limitless potential, but the path to adulthood has a way of exposing character flaws. And sometimes brilliant children become evil adults. But are they born that way? Or does reality have a way of twisting good intentions? Today we're going to try to answer this question by examining the life of William Walker. He was a child prodigy who became dictator to help spread the institution of slavery? How exactly did this happen? Childhood and duels. William Walker was born in 1824 in Nashville, Tennessee. His father was James Walker, an English immigrant, and Mary Norval. Mary was the daughter of a Virginia general who served in the Revolutionary War. Also, William's uncle was a United States Senator. William Walker came from a well-known and established family. He had every advantage a child could be offered at the time. Walker was also a very bright young man. At the age of 14, William graduated summa cum laude from the University of Nashville with a law degree. He studied medicine in Scotland and Germany, before finally receiving a medical degree from the University of Pennsylvania at the age of 19. He practiced medicine in Philadelphia briefly, then moved to New Orleans to practice law. And William Walker didn't seem to care much for law either. He practiced the legal profession in New Orleans for a short time, but then he quit to become co-owner of the New Orleans Crescent newspaper. Journalism seemed to suit him better than his previous two short-lived professions, as he stayed with it for a few years. In 1849, William left New Orleans and moved to San Francisco, where he worked as editor of the San Francisco Herald. William Walker had quite a temper, which became obvious during his time in California when he gained a reputation for participating in duels. He supposedly engaged in 3 of them, but only one attracted attention from newspapers across the country. Walker wrote an article in the Herald that criticized law clerk William Hicks Graham. Graham was very angry about it and challenged Walker to a duel. It was a poor choice on the part of William Walker. Graham had fought in many duels out west, and won. This is part of why the press was so interested. Walker, by contrast, had only fought one duel before with a single-shot pistol, but his fight with Graham would use revolvers. The two met at the designated location on January 12, 1851. Each of them were given a Colt revolver with 5 shots. Upon the signal of a referee, they both aimed and tried to fire at the opponent. Graham quickly fired 2 shots, hitting Walker in the leg and thigh, which seriously wounded him. Walker tried but failed to ever fire a shot from his weapon and eventually conceded. William Walker lived, though his reputation was clearly damaged. Mexican invasion. For some people, losing a duel in such an embarrassing manner might result in some type of introspection. For Walker, though, it seemed to make him want to play with guns even more. In the summer of 1853, William Walker traveled to Guaymas in northwest Mexico. He asked the government of Mexico to give him a grant so that he could start a colony. The colony was sold to the Mexican government under the premise that it would serve as a buffer to protect United States territories from Native Americans attacking them. Given recent events of the Mexican-American War, which included the loss of Texas, it wasn't surprising to anyone that Mexico denied the request. After being denied, Walker returned to San Francisco. He was determined to establish his colony even if the Mexican government refused. He began recruiting men who supported slavery and the Manifest Destiny doctrine, most of whom were from Tennessee and Kentucky. The people he recruited essentially believed that it was the destiny of white Americans to spread to other nations. And of course, to colonize other nations, they also needed lots and lots of slaves. As supporters joined him, Walker changed his goal from simply creating a colony to establishing a new republic in Mexico. He hoped to repeat what had happened with Texas, which resulted in it leaving Mexico and joining the United States. On October 5, 1853, William Walker, along with 45 men and his former law partner Henry P. Watkins, traveled to Mexico. They intended to conquer the Baja California territories in the Sonora state. The group met with some initial success. They were able to capture La Paz, the capital of Baja California. Of course, the region was also sparsely populated, which was a great help. Walker appointed Henry Watkins as vice president, then put the region under the same laws as Louisiana. This had the intended effect of making slavery legal in the region. Under the laws of Mexico, that would not have been allowed. Mexico, of course, did not intend to let Walker permanently occupy their territory, and William Walker was generally frightened of attacks by the Mexican government. He moved his headquarters 3 different times throughout the Baja California area, but 3 months later he gave up and retreated. Heavy resistance from Mexico, combined with an inability to resupply, made occupying the Baja California area impossible. Not guilty. The United States government was not pleased with William Walker's escapades. Upon returning to California, he was put on trial for conducting an illegal war. Apparently, the Neutrality Act of 1794 meant it was a violation of the law for him to invade and occupy a foreign country. Unfortunately for the United States government, they couldn't find a jury that would convict him. The philosophy of manifest destiny was very popular in the southern U.S. and the Western Territories. The jury that heard Walker's case took only 8 minutes to acquit him. After nearly dying in a duel, then failing to invade a foreign country, it would be understandable if Walker decided to count his losses and return to law, medicine, or journalism. But he was not the type of person to abandon a bad idea so easily. Another opportunity would emerge the following year in Nicaragua. The Panama Canal did not exist until the early 20th century, and in the 1850s, there was also no transcontinental railway connecting New York and San Francisco, so trade between the two cities often went through Nicaragua. Ships from New York would enter a river from the Atlantic Ocean and sail into Lake Nicaragua. There, a stagecoach would carry goods across a narrow strip of land to ships waiting on the other side of the country. The route was controlled by a company owned by Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was one of the wealthiest businessmen of the 19th century. Nicaragua also had 2 prominent political parties, the Legitimist Party and the Democratic Party. In 1854, the two entered into direct conflict, and civil war was the result. The Democratic Party was aware of Walker's exploits in Mexico and apparently saw it as an opportunity to gain an advantage over the Legitimist Party. The Democratic Party asked Walker to provide military support for their cause. William Walker didn't want to be put on trial again, so he tried to cover his bases this time. He had the Democratic President of Nicaragua, Francisco Castellon, provide a contract which allowed him to bring up to 300 colonists to Nicaragua. Of course, this was a lie. These people were not being brought to establish a colony. On May 3, 1855, Walker sailed out of San Francisco with about 60 men. When they landed in Nicaragua, 110 locals were added to Walker's mercenary force. War in Nicaragua. William Walker convinced some well-known people to join him on the adventure. They aren't well-known today, but people in the mid-19th century knew who they were. His crew included Charles Wilkins Weber, a journalist and well-known explorer. Charles Frederick Henningsen was an English adventurer who also joined Walker's group. Additionally, 3 other members of the mercenary force would later go on to become generals in the Confederate Army during the U.S. Civil War. The fact that Walker was able to assemble this group and sail to Nicaragua says a lot about the United States during the 1850s. Technically, Walker was violating U.S. law for the 2nd time, but he could not be convicted due to the popularity of his actions. Actions which were so popular that they attracted at least one international celebrity to join. Clearly, a lot of people really liked owning slaves. They liked it so much that it made perfect sense to invade countries that didn't allow slavery and force it upon them. With consent from the president, Walker and his group attacked the Legitimists near the city of Rivas. He was forced to retreat, but did inflict heavy casualties. But Walker and his mercenaries would prevail. On September 3rd, his forces finally defeated the Legitimists' army. Then, on October 3rd, they conquered Granada and Walker was effectively in control of the country. At first, he ruled as commander of the army through the provisional president, Patricio Rivas. But then U.S. President Franklin Pierce, on May 20th, 1856, recognized Walker and his regime as the legitimate authority in Nicaragua. William Walker then held a fraudulent election in Nicaragua in July, after which he declared himself president. Despite this, the ambassador Walker appointed and sent to Washington, D.C. was not accepted or recognized by the United States government. Have you noticed that Franklin Pierce shows up in several Bad Things in History episodes? We sure have. Given mixed signals from the U.S. government, Walker fell back on old habits. He repealed anti-slavery laws which he hoped would generate some support from the southern U.S. states. Unsurprisingly, William Walker's actions had a number of unintended consequences. One of the most immediate was that he angered the Vanderbilt family. Two subordinates of the Vanderbilt Company in Nicaragua convinced Walker to seize Vanderbilt property and hand it over to them. Vanderbilt was enraged and sent two secret agents to fight against Walker. Eventually, these agents would regain control of Vanderbilt's ships, which had been essential to resupplying Walker. Costa Rica and Honduras, which were adjacent to Nicaragua, were also not pleased by recent developments. The Costa Rican president, Juan Rafael Mora Porras, rejected all diplomatic efforts from William Walker and prepared his country for war. William Walker responded by organizing 4 groups of mercenaries to invade Costa Rica. One company was composed of Germans, another was composed of French, and the remaining 2 included mostly Americans. They preemptively attempted to invade Costa Rica. Walker's force was defeated in the Battle of Santa Rosa on March 20th, 1856. Walker's most important defeat came when the Costa Rican army defeated Walker's forces at Rivas. A Costa Rican soldier and drummer, Juan Santa Maria, became a Costa Rican national hero by sacrificing himself to burn down Walker's headquarters. William Walker was not one to lose gracefully. He responded to the defeat by purposely poisoning the water wells in Rivas with corpses that were infected by cholera. Within a few months, the illness spread to the population of Rivas and the Costa Rican troops. By the time it was done, 10,000 civilians would be dead. Walker, with this single action, managed to kill almost 10% of the population of Costa Rica. The countries around Nicaragua decided the most important thing they could do was defeat William Walker. The Honduran president sent troops to join the Costa Rican forces. The Costa Rican army was also joined by troops from Guatemala and El Salvador. On December 14, 1856, the city of Granada was surrounded. Walker and his men could no longer hold it. They retreated across Lake Nicaragua, but not before burning the city to the ground. William Walker and his men destroyed one of the oldest cities in the region as a, in quotes, salutary dread of American justice, a statement Walker gave along with the order to burn it to the ground. On May 1st, 1857, William Walker somehow managed to escape the numerous armies hunting for him. He surrendered to Commander Charles Henry Davis of the U.S. Navy. After this, he was sent back to New York City. Try and try again. Despite having failed yet again, Walker was greeted as a hero when he arrived in New York. Public opinion began to shift somewhat when he then blamed the U.S. Navy for his failure. In addition to never finding fault with himself, Walker was very persistent. Within 6 months of his arrival in New York, he set out on another expedition. He was arrested by the U.S. Navy and sent back to the United States before reaching his destination. But there was controversy over whether his arrest was actually legal. Public opinion, yet again, was not on the side of law and order. Walker wrote a book of his account, then returned to Central America yet again. This time he was courted by British colonists that inhabited islands off the coast of Honduras. The colonists were worried the Honduran government would establish control over them and approached Walker to see if he might establish an English-speaking government that had control of the islands. Walker was all too happy to help them. The British government, however, was not very pleased to have William Walker interfering in the region. Commander Noel Salmon of the British Royal Navy arrested Walker before he could do anything to assist the colonists. And nobody really knows why, but the British naval commander did not return Walker to U.S. authorities. Instead, Walker was delivered to authorities in Honduras. Although Walker evaded death many times before, his luck finally ran out. The Honduran government sentenced William Walker to death. He was executed by firing squad on September 12, 1860. Despite his attempts to overthrow numerous governments, there was one positive result of Walker's actions. He caused Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Honduras to all unite against him. Because of this, Costa Rica still celebrates the defeat of William Walker as a national holiday. Every year on April 11th, Costa Rica honors its national heroes who fought to destroy the American dictator that wanted to bring slavery to their lands. And although we don't know why the British handed Walker over to the Hondurans, there are several reasons why this could have happened. The British could have realized that Walker would simply return in the future and wanted the issue solved permanently. And what better way than to let the Hondurans enact their own form of justice? It's also possible that Vanderbilt used his enormous fortune to ensure that Walker, after leaving the United States for the last time, would never return alive. Stealing from one of the richest men alive is bound to have consequences eventually. However it happened, there was no shortage of enemies wanting revenge. It is also disturbing that the United States government tried and failed to stop him more than once. The laws made his actions illegal, but so much of the country's population supported Walker that they couldn't actually enforce them. The amount of support that William Walker received from his fellow citizens is difficult to understand for those of us that share in modern morality. What do you think about William Walker? Was he a promising child who was led astray? Or was he just a horrible person, gifted with academic talent? Or, my personal spin on it, he was just a dick. Please let us know your opinion in the comments below. And thank you for watching Bad Things in History.